discussants, I'd like to give at least a couple of minutes, and then we'd like to, our chairperson has kindly agreed to give a synoptic view and also give his suggestions for moving forward.
Okay.
7 minutes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you very much. I will not stick to my script, but I'll try and bring across what I'm trying to say. I'm looking at expert medical care, the prospects for regional specialized hospital in sub-Sahara Africa. The motivation for this is that we have seen a lot of patients from sub-Sahara coming for treatment, not only to India, but to Europe, due to the fact that we lack the expertise and the equipment in Africa. Now, unfortunately, this has been the preserve of a few privileged people. The majority, when you have a disease like cancer, which is curable in Asia, in India, it becomes a death sentence. And that should not be the case. So I see this as a gap which needs to be addressed. There is a need to bring this specialist treatment closer to the people of sub-Sahara Africa. As I travel back to Africa, to my country, it's very likely that I'll be on the same plane with someone who is very, very sick, requiring medical assistance. The last time I came to India for my course in South-South cooperation, I flew from Ethiopia to New Delhi with someone who was on oxygen. Now, we can't have that continuing, especially when our brothers in India have come up with a lot of measures, a lot of equipment that can assist sub-Sahara Africa. Now, according to the World Health Organization, the patients that, the percentage of patients coming to India from sub-Sahara is 95%, with only 1% going to Latin America and the others heading to Europe. An observation by Apollo Hospital head was that there is a proven clinical competencies that India has, the competitive advantage in the provision of quality and competitive healthcare and pharmaceutical services, not only to Asia. We heard just the other day, there was a speaker from India who was speaking about how they are capable of addressing up to 95% of their pharmaceutical needs. I wish we could say the same for sub-Sahara. Not yet, we'll get there. So through South-South cooperation, India can offer capacity building, intellectual transfer, to the, and technological transfer to the least developed countries in the healthcare provision to the citizens through access to specialized healthcare centers. How do we finance this? That's a big question. The UN Development Partnership Fund, to which India has, I think the last time I was checking that, put in about $1 million. Maybe that could be channeled towards a project like this one. We could try also medical insurance to try and do a private partnership arrangement, or through direct investments by the private companies who can invest purely for business prospects. Because if we have governments able to send a certain number of patients to India for treatment, then there must be some money somewhere. And if we've got private citizens who are also able to send themselves to India, there must be some money somewhere. So there is the potential to bring this service closer to the people, and yes, they would pay for it. And through government-to-government assistance, on terms of South-South cooperation, which is for the mutual benefit. If you come into Africa as an investor, definitely you're there to make a business. And On the other side, we also benefit by having that access to quality medical care. What are we addressing? Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 3, which speaks towards the attainment of good health and well-being for all. I like how it says good health and well-being for all. It doesn't show privilege. It means that even the underprivileged, when they have, because disease doesn't choose, we all get sick. Just because you're not poor doesn't mean you will not get cancer, or just because you're poor doesn't mean that you can't get cancer. You can. You can have kidney failure. For the poor, like I said earlier on, that spells a death sentence. For the privileged, it's an opportunity maybe to look for better health care. This also ties into SDG 17, that sticks to strengthen the global partnerships. It's an opportunity here. It ties also into the agenda for sustainable development of the African Union, which seeks to bring mutual economic benefits to nations, international communities, civil society, private sector, and other actors. BAPA 40, BAPA plus 40. It addresses the mutual benefits to be raised from these ventures. It solidifies the gains to be achieved through accessible quality health care. It provides a service while making economic and social impact to the communities. I would like to say here that the challenges I see are that just a few days I've been here. I don't know how many doctors have come to us and given us cards, or, if you need treatment in Africa, from Africa, we provide this service. There's a possibility that we won't even get that quality healthcare that we're looking for, because we can't even be sure that these doctors can help us, yeah? And this is a big industry for India. There's no doubt about that. Medical tourism, there are so many companies that are into this. We see it back home, where they're advertising, this hospital is very good for kidney transplant. This hospital is good for heart. This hospital is good for... So it is big business. And we understand that this is probably something that you'd like to hold close to your chests. But in the spirit of South-South cooperation, it would be good for you to bring this service closer to us in our communities, maybe at a regional level. It would still be better than flying thousands of miles to come to India. And this would go towards what India has always stood for. You have been there for Africa in the field of defense supplies, capacity building. We are here out of your generosity. So we appeal once more, this time to something that is different. Not TB, not diarrheal diseases. No, Africa has a new challenge. We have lifestyle diseases, and we need help towards that. I thank you.
Thank you, that was a very subtle and good criticism of the medical system. Yes, I think it should cater to the needs of the deprived sections, as it is trying to do within the country. Or under South-South cooperation, there should be similar provisions. The next speaker, Claudette. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Claudette Regina Corrales. She's not here. Okay, then we shift to the next one. Aline Duarte Garcia. Sorry, I didn't get my specs, so I'm challenged visually. Please come over.
So good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you, Arias, for this opportunity. Okay, thank you. So my paper is about the private sector engagement in South-South cooperation. We focus on the case of the Brazilian National Service of Industrial Learning, SENAI, in Cape Verde. About motivation, first of all, I have to say that this paper is a part of my PhD thesis on Brazilian South-South cooperation in Africa, in Mozambique and Cape Verde, that is in progress. And the motivation of this specific paper is to think about, to understand the role of private sector engagement in Brazilian South-South cooperation. So 3 basic issues guided this study. So first, it's what is the current debate on private sector engagement in South-South cooperation? Second, what are the projects implemented by SENAI with the Global South partners countries? And third, how are the financial resources operated private and state in SENAI projects? So to answer these questions, some solutions were implemented. So first, I did a desk review on private sector engagement in international cooperation. And second, data source collected from official documents, interview from SENAI and ABC, the Brazilian Cooperation Agency, and from IEFP, that it's Institute for Employment and Capacity, Professional Training in Praia, Cape Verde. For the sources triangulations, the SENAI activities in Global South was mapped. We focus on Cape Verde case. So some outcomes. About desk review, so you have two main discussions. First, it's about definition of private sector engagement, the definition of the private sector activities, what kind of institutions you can consider as private sector, and what kind of activities you can consider as private sector engagement in international cooperation and South-South cooperation. The second debate discussion, it's about the contributions of private sector for achieving the SDGs. So you have so different perspective of this, the role of private sector for achieving SDGs. About SENAI activities and some result, the paper highlighted the SENAI activities in southern countries in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And in the specific case of Cape Verde, the paper showed some results of the project. The project has been for 4 years and have some positive result. That the project is considered both Brazil and Cape Verde actors as a positive, successful project. And in this project, it's considered a structuring project that it's based on capacity building idea. So about financial support, all SENAI and ABC South-South cooperation projects are financially supported by Brazilian government. So you can say that it's a kind of PPP, public-private partnership, but in general lines, because in Brazil you have so strict law about PPP that don't include international project, but in general lines, maybe you can say that it's a kind of PPP. So in this sense, you have to think about the state interest and the private sector interest in the project. So you should think about that. So The main challenge of this third, sorry, were first to map the Brazilian South-South Cooperation Initiative. It's always a challenge because despite the fact that you have cooperation agents, the activities are not centralized. So you have diffuse cooperation. So always to map Brazilian activities in South-South cooperation is a challenge. And the second, to map Brazilian private sector initiative in South-South cooperation, it's even more difficult. So it's the second challenge. And my paper is not about evaluation or assessment, but I want to highlight this challenge because when you think about South-South cooperation, you should think about evaluation, impact, monitoring, evaluation, and assessment. Finally, I believe that the paper can offer some contributions to, first, the private sector engagement in South-South cooperation debate. And second, to understand, to debate of the role of private sector for achieving SDGs. And finally, for Brazilian South-South cooperation in Africa studies, specifically in educational sector. I want to just relate this to talk a little bit about the project. This project, it's about training, professional training. And Senai has in Cape Verde a lot of courses, such as computing, civil construction, bakery, a lot of kind of courses, or professional course. And you have some report about employability after the project, that it's a very interesting result and a positive result. So, I think this is it. So, how many time I have? Oh, that's okay. No, so thanks so much for any questions. So you can find me at my email address. Thank you.
You contributed extra minute for the discussion. We have the last presenter, Mrs. Wong.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm very happy to be here to learn and to share some information related to my job. My topic today is applying integrated crop management (ICM) for sustainable development of black pepper in Vietnam. You can see in this table, in 2017, Vietnam pepper area over 100,000 hectares, with the production about 175 metric tons, and on most of this production we use for export. Only a little bit percentage of black pepper we use for consumption. Compared to 2007, in 2017, the area's production, export, and consumption increased more than double. It was an impressive the number, but behind this number, what happened with Vietnam pepper production? With a quick increase of growing area and intensive cultivation of black pepper in the past 10 years, Vietnam is dealing with a big problem. The problem is that disease, especially foot rot disease, such as quick wilt disease due to Phytophthora capsicum and slow decline due to nematode. This is a picture of foot rot disease due to Phytophthora capsicum. For Phytophthora capsicum, we cannot treat this disease, but we only use the method to prevent when we planting. And this is the garden and the picture of the garden. 100% of pepper plant that by Phytophthora capsicum. And nowadays in Vietnam, 100 hectares of pepper plant are died by Phytophthora capsicum. This is a big problem in Vietnam, and also in India, Malaysia, and Indonesia. We recognize the big problem is disease, and how Vietnam's farmer treat and control with this disease. The answer is that we use ICM method. ICM method to like prevent this disease, likely like our cancer. We cannot treat. We only prevent when we planting. And ICM method, we have a different stages. The first of all, I would like to say we have to make a good drainage system when we establish the garden. After that, we have to sun dryer soils mixed with trichoderma treated with manure, maybe 2 months before we planting. In the monsoon, we have to pruning of the liver spot and pepper plant 3 times, especially in the monsoon. And we have to balance the chemical fertilizer and organic manure. For organic manure, we can apply as much as we can. It depends on our condition. And next, we have to apply enough water in the dry season and good drainage during the monsoon, because pepper cannot lack up the water in the dry season. If in the garden has infected plants, we have to take on of the infected plants out of the garden and burn to prevent it separate the Phytophthora capsicum in the garden. The pet practice is we using wheel groundnut. We call arachid pintoy and munching of rice straw and dryer wet in the dry. And we can intercropping with coffee plant in the pepper garden. And this is the picture of micro spike and drip irrigation. Number 2 is cover crop. We use white groundnut in the pepper garden. And the number 3, we have to make a good drainage system in the monsoon. And this is the picture of the ICM demonstration in Vietnam. Good practice. And for Vietnam, we have 4 main challenges for pepper production in Vietnam. The first one is climate change. As you know, Vietnam is one of the most country affected by climate change, and agriculture is either factor affected by climate change. Secondly, price fluctuation and high investment. So far, about 5 years, pepper price is the lowest. So many farmers don't want to merge their farm, and due to the low production. The next is pest and diseases. As I mentioned above, pest and diseases are the big problem of pepper plant. And the last one is labor. That is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We still have a few more minutes, so I can see 2 of our discussants taking copious notes. I would think that if they can highlight, based on the presentations, what have been the major areas of success, what have been the limitations, and what are the areas of concern that have emerged from the presentation. May I request Ms. Sitlali just to I mean, if she wants, you can just take three issues, but also an additional point you can make will be welcome.
Yes, thank you.
But 3 minutes, huh?
It is, okay.
3 to 4 minutes.
3 minutes,
3
4
to 4
minutes?
You
I don't
know,
think
otherwise,
so. I'm
well,
sorry, but
we will.
it will take a bit
We'll
more.
disturb the next session, you know.
Well, I will try to. Okay, well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I am really delighted to be here. Thank you to RIS for the invitation, and well, congratulations to to all the young scholars here, all the effort to have these outcomes, the research outcomes, and all the results that you have presented here are very, very interesting, and undoubtedly they provide a very interesting inputs to the current debate of South-South and triangular cooperation. I also have learned from the experiences, the local, regional, bilateral, and political aspects that you have highlighted. So, well, I read all the papers and put attention in the presentations here. And well, I will basically I will set some questions to the scholars, so you can you decide if you want to go further in these aspects.
You don't have to comment on every paper. The papers that you think you can pick.
Yes, just certain very specific aspects. Yes. Well, for Heba, thank you. I would like to. I would suggest you to focus on which countries in Africa you want to deepen your research. To also to deepen on the concept of corporation partnership. That is not very usual, but it is interesting in your research. What would you think is the role of the global partnership for development cooperation, if it has something to do here or not? Maybe your research has the possibility to explain the bridge from cooperation to trade and the way back. From cooperation to trade and from trade to development. There's an interesting way to develop. To what extent India's South-South and triangular cooperation really foster SDGs in Africa? Because it was in your paper, but it was not very developed. And to specify countries and SDGs, which countries, which SDGs you want to focus, as well as implementation mechanisms. Well, we don't have time for your reply, but maybe to write down these recommendations.
No, these specific details, I would suggest you write it out and pass it on. I thought you can make comments on the general.
On the general.
Because, you know, if you get into each paper in detail, we would not have time for it.
Oh, I thought I had the opportunity to give
I think
feedback
that
to each one of them
all benefit
openly.
From it if you just write
Okay.
it up and we'll, but
Well,
you know, make the basic issues which have come up in general. That would or quickly you can go over each paper, but 1 or 2 sentences.
Yes, yes. Well, for other research, it is necessary to deepen maybe in ownership. To what extent are the actors really foster ownerships? What is the role of local communities? What is the role? What is the governance of South-South and triangular cooperation in each one of the cases? Maybe that is a challenge. Also, rethinking official development assistance is lacking of a discussion
on the TOST, the Total Official Support on Sustainable Development, that is also related to financing for development. That is another topic to go further. What else? Structure. In terms of format, just maybe one or two research need a more specific structure to focus in a temporary framework, a geographical framework. If it is the case of Guatemala, well, having a general landscape is good and a historical context is good. A geographical and temporary framework would be better to focus the research. Also to reflect where is the focus, what tools and mechanisms of South-Southern triangular cooperation can provide some evidence to advocate better your results. Focus on SDGs, focus to reflect also where is the interconnectivity of SDGs in your researches, because maybe it is about health, it is about education, but there are other aspects of other SDGs that can be also attended. And maybe I can write each scholar to give some specific inputs. But well, I didn't know I had 3 minutes. But
no, we had 1.5 hours. We had to have those many. But I must say that your comments are very perceptive, very specific, and they will be benefiting the authors in revising. And in RIS, we have a plan of bringing out this as a publication. So certainly, please consider these specific suggestions.
Okay.
I'm assuming I have 2 minutes then.
We'll take 4 minutes. Right?
Okay, 4
Double
minutes.
of
Since I also read all the papers, I'm going to send you afterwards the comments, specific comments. I'll just focus on 3 or 4 issues that are common to all, that are probably broader to us as researchers in South-South cooperation. I know not every single person here would say would consider itself a researcher, or sometimes is in academia, proper formal academia, sometimes is doing research as a kind of knowledge for action within your own institution, private, government, public. So I think even though I would say some of the things are more focused to academia, so there are some academic standards that how you do papers, how you investigate, how you research, how you reference, and I think those are important if you are actually planning to follow the academia. If you're not, I think it's still valid that the more you can cite empirical research data from government or from international organizations or from other scholars studying South-South cooperation, the richer the dialogue becomes. So this is like a very general comment that I think it's important. The other one is a challenge that we all face in researching South-South cooperation, which I also identified in some of the papers, most of them. It's the balance between analyzing discourse, official discourses, preferences, political preferences, and the data you can back what you're saying. And I think it's important because we are in a moment that we are actually deep in the whole debate in South-South cooperation. We need this data. We need to back some of the things that we are saying and some of the statements we are saying with empirical data. And I think this is a kind of a challenge to move beyond the political discourse of what South-South cooperation is, what South-South cooperation means, its contributions to SDGs. I think this is one topic I'm just going to go with 1 minute because it's just one example of what I mean when I say we have to go deeper. And I think the political documents on South-South cooperation have been highlighting the link between South-South cooperation and the SDGs. So this is the sentence of it contributes to the SDGs. Some of the papers are analyzing specific sectors, health sector, agricultural sector, the private sector. And then it says, well, this project or this partnership contributes to the SDGs. And I would actually push us to go deeper and push you in every single paper to go deeper and say, what do you mean by contributes? So there are many ways in which you can go deeper into the discussion. You can actually get, if you want to go into the technicalities of SDGs, you can actually get the indicators and see what are, unpack the different SDGs you're working and see what are the indicators that the UN has been agreeing on. And then maybe look at them, because it already unpacks a little bit. And then see, well, is my project or the project I'm analyzing, this partnership, contributing? Can I use the indicators? This is just one possibility. Another possibility that it's related to the debates we're having here is to understand in what, when you say contributes, and I think Aline actually mentioned in her presentation, are you talking about results, outputs? Are you talking about outcomes? Are you talking about impact? And if you're talking, I mean, there is no problem if you choose any one of those levels. The important thing, I think we have to all, as researchers in South-South cooperation, is that you have to be clear about what you mean by contribution. And then if you're looking at the output level, which means activities, number of trainings, number of doctors, number of pepper crops, you have to go and say, I'm looking at this level of contribution, which is fine. The second level could be, no, now I'm looking at impact or outcomes. And what are the outcomes? Health outcomes, agricultural outcomes, industrial outcomes. So then I think it's a matter of us being honest and transparent with the readers of what exactly are we talking about, and to make deeper and deeper discussions and unpack this idea of contribution. I mean, we all want to say South-South cooperation is contributing, but then how and why? And finally, that's my final point, sorry. I wanted to echo something. That was my perception while reading the papers. My perception on us having to be critical and having to, but critical doesn't mean good or bad. I mean, of course, you can have a normative assessment of a project. I like, I don't like, or affected population or target populations like or don't like. But that's not exactly what I mean by being critical. Being critical is actually to underline some of the tensions, the options, the politics of it. So someone actually said ODA is political. I would suggest you that South-South cooperation, it's also about politics. And then I'll leave it there, and I'll send you the comments I have to each of the papers, okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for your very critical observations with regard to research on South-South cooperation and also measurement issues. Before I request our chairperson to give his views on the presentations and also in general views about the future of South-South cooperation, I thought I will not be misusing the authority of the co-chairperson if I just flag one issue that strikes me. You see, from the presentations, especially SIS, Adriano, they were making this point that if you bring in strict measurement, benefit cost analysis, and then bring the North-South cooperation model, then obviously you are violating the basic principles of South-South cooperation, which we have been enunciating right from Bandung to Nairobi. So there has to be trust, there has to be respect for sovereignty, there has to be a process of learning and sharing. And that is the fundamental thing. The other point that emerges is that South is no longer as homogeneous as it used to be in the 50s and the 60s. There are countries which have emerged and they have a capability, and others are looking at them to play the role of a leader and make capital investment, And also the suggestion that has been given by Maria, also Ms. Grasa Rizzo, that involve the private sector and see to it, and I entirely agree with Maria that, one couple from Pakistan going back with their child whose heart was damaged, back to Pakistan is much better than a ministerial statement for 1 hour, that creates much better goodwill. But, good hospitals in India are in the private sector. Right? Many of them are in the private sector. And you talked about private sector's participation. The moment you bring in private sector participation also in the South-South cooperation, they are functioning on the basis of the profits, right? So how does the government play a role in bringing the private sector within the frame of South-South cooperation, mutual trust and respect for sovereignty would be an issue that we have to discuss that. Sorry, I won't take more time. You have been really very patient and very nice chairperson. Would like to listen to your views.
Yeah, that's a very interesting comment. The less you speak, the nicer you are. So, but that is not.
You worried that now.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that, but that is not necessarily true about all the papers that have been presented here. Um, I mean, almost every one of you have really gone into the uh, basic structure of the study that you have been conducting. So, of course, I would leave it to Madam Sitlali and Madam Laura to give finer comments. They seem to be more associated with academics probably. So it would be better. But I think I'll pick up from where Laura left. The basic, the fundamental principle of South-South cooperation is what is it? Is it development or is it happiness? So we all talk about, if you look at the gradual process of engagement between countries, we talk about South-South cooperation. So that is also engagement between countries, between people, between governments. United Nations is an engagement between the peoples of the world. But no individual citizen of any country can become a member of United Nations. Only countries can become. And the two only governments can become. So the government of India, the government of Pakistan, the government of Zimbabwe, the government of China decides who will represent China in the United Nations. But does he really represent the people of China? May or may not. He, at the most, he or she represents the government of that country. And then again the question comes, does the government of the country really represent the people of that country? So many issues of geopolitics. So I will not go into those details of geopolitics. So ultimately, what we are trying to achieve? South-South cooperation is an engagement not between governments. South-South cooperation, the ultimate goal of South-South cooperation is what? Development or happiness? So if you go into the question of development, development was conceived as strength. Which is the most developed country? The country which is very strong. So what was the criteria for strength? 100 years back, the criteria of strength was land. Who holds the maximum land? The biggest colonizer was the happiest person, or the happiest country, or the most developed country. So we had the Great Britain was a colonizer, France was a colonizer, Spain was a colonizer, Portugal was a colonizer. We had Portuguese colony in India, we had Portuguese colony in Africa, we had French colonies in Africa, we had British colonies all over the world. So which is the strongest country today? Great Britain, Spain, Portuguese. We talk about US, we talk about China. As I said yesterday, out of 4 largest economies, 3 are in the South-South cooperation area: China, Japan and India. Where is Portugal? And we don't know what will happen to UK after Brexit, if at all it happens. So the strength of development, the most powerful country on the earth, was not actually colony. So people started thinking about that. And then the next phase came. The next phase was not holding on to huge lands, but the real development, the real power is in the army, is how we are able to win a war. How many countries you control. Then we came to the phase of the world wars, the First World War and the Second World War. The First and the Second World War was all about deciding whose army is superior. And then that resulted in the arms race, that resulted in a Cold War. But did the strongest army really became the strongest power? Germany was the most strongest army at that time, but it lost the war ultimately to a very weak army, Great Britain. And then so many other institutions like NATO and other things were put together, but I will not go into those details. But did that determine strength? And did that strength determine development? And did that development determine happiness? No. And then came the third phase, which we are experiencing now. And the third phase is, the stronger the economy, stronger you are, more developed you are. So your development indices are decided by the strength of your economy. How powerful is your currency? The more powerful the currency, the more powerful you are. How do you have more powerful currency? The more you are able to consume. So the more you consume, the more happiness you are. All of you must have studied a very wonderful book long back, about 4 or 5 decades back. It was published by Schumacher. Small is beautiful. So in that he gives an example of one of the greatest philosophers, thinkers of India, Buddha. So he gives the example of Buddha. Is consumption equal to happiness? The one who consumes the most is the most happiest. Is it true? Buddha says no. One who consumes the least is the happiest. So if you are unwell, you go to the doctor. The doctor, what does he tell? Does he tell you to eat more, or he tells you to eat less? He tells you to eat less. If you want happiness, consume less. Conserve more. So it is consumption versus conservation. It is conflict versus consensus. So slowly we are all moving towards a situation where we would need more consensus, more cooperation, more conservation than more conflicts. So that is a stage which we are experiencing as far as South-South cooperation is concerned. So we will all have to also go into the details of not how of the transfer of technology, but why of the transfer of technology. We all know technology, we know how to transfer technology, but what probably we don't realize now is why to transfer technology. If I have a technology, if it is good for me, how can I keep it only to myself and be happy? The basic essence of cooperation is how I can transfer this technology to those who really require it. That is where you pointed out about medical facility. I'll be very happy if I'm able to set up 100 wonderful hospitals in India which will cater to the needy people in Africa. But I will be much happier if I am able to replicate this model in Africa. In fact, India is now, the Minister of External Affairs is very seriously considering a model wherein we will be able to replicate a huge series of hospitals in Bangladesh. Because the maximum number of patients who come from Bangladesh are to Kolkata, the closest city. From Dhaka it is easy to travel to Kolkata, they come there. A large number of people from Nepal, Kathmandu, come to India. But how do they come to Kathmandu in the beginning? They come from various Mofussil areas in and around Kathmandu. They travel about 100, 200 kilometers from Kathmandu. They come there to the city. They have no facilities in the city. They then take train journey or bus journey. All of them cannot afford aircrafts, so they come to Delhi, Bombay, and other places. So if you look at this whole idea of medical tourism, as someone mentioned, it sounds beautiful, great, as far as the Indian economy is concerned. But if Indian economy improves because of medical tourism, it's very difficult. In fact, a friend of mine who was establishing a hospital called me for a inaugural chief guest. So I said it's very difficult to cut the ribbon for a hospital. If I say your hospital should prosper, I'm actually wishing that more people should fall ill. And if I say your hospital should not prosper, I would be really being very uncharitable to you. So that is the situation that we are all in. So can we as students, can we as researchers, can we as academicians, and can we as participants in this whole process of South-South cooperation think in those terms? What should be the fundamental principle of South-South cooperation? South-South cooperation, the ultimate goal of South-South cooperation, and as it is developing, a gradual unfoldment of this purpose. So when this purpose is gradually unfolding, what that purpose is, the ultimate purpose is that of happiness. And happiness through cooperation, happiness through conservation, happiness through consensus. Can we build that? And for that, what is all that we have to do? Are we really building that kind of an institution? Should there be an institution? We spoke about unity as far as SDGs are concerned. The basic difference between MDGs and SDGs is that SDGs have been determined after wider consultations. MDGs were not decided after consultation. But all the same, it's important that we think in larger terms of SDGs. And for SDGs, we need unity. So what we have today is international institutions and a few countries controlling those international institutions. And what they have is not unity, but uniformity. So there are what we call the conditionalities of IMF. So these are all the conditionalities. What are these conditionalities? The conditionalities are you have a uniform institutional framework. Uniform institutional framework. So if I have particular banking system, you also should have the similar banking system so that I can give you aid. If you don't have those systems, you put those systems in place. Whether your country requires it or not, whether you deserve it or not, and whether it is useful to you or not. No, you have to do this. So medical pricing, pricing of medicines, pricing of services, it's all uniformity. So institutionalization does not mean uniformity. Institutionalization should actually come to mean unity. So the idea of achieving this kind of diversity, keeping the diversity, and at the same time unity, finding that unity in that diversity. Can we really think of those institutional framework models? That, I think, should be what we should all be working on, and it would be very interesting and good if we can contribute towards that thinking, and that is the real purpose of this whole session that RIS was conceiving of. Thank you very much.
It's been a very, very interesting session, and we, extended the time because I didn't want to really cut short many of the presentations which are very exciting, and you came all the way. So the suggestion that has come from the organizers is that we have 5 to 7 minutes convenience break, and then you can pick up your tea and coffee and come back, right? So that the next session doesn't suffer because of shortage of time. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you. Group.